This is Paul Schmid. Welcome to the Pursuit Zone. After college graduation, my next guest jumped from South America to a Northern California Buddhist monastery to a year of law school before dropping out. He then spent 8 years as executive director at the Isabella Freedman Jewish Retreat Center, an environmental education center and farm in Connecticut. In 2010, he founded Urban Adamah, an urban produce farm on an acre of land in Berkeley, California, that has quickly grown into a thriving environmental education center and gathering place for the Bay Area Jewish community. Adam Berman, welcome to the Pursuit Zone.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Adam, I found your background very interesting. What, first of all, drew you to study environmental policy?
The truth is I don't really know. I know that when I was about 15 years old, I remember sitting in the living room of my parents' house, and there was a documentary that came on the television set about the solid waste crisis that our planet was facing. And I remember watching it and feeling deeply moved and saddened by what I was watching. And, it's interesting. I think that I don't know why of all of the kind of suffering that's taking place around the globe right now, locally and internationally, I'm not sure why at age, I think I was 14 or 15, that environmental issue touched me in a way that still continues to touch me and motivate me in the work that I do. But it was a combination of the pain that I felt from watching that documentary and then subsequently deciding to read more about environmental problems that on the one hand was a motivator for me, and sort of on the other hand, I remember spending significant time in nature as a child with my grandparents. I remember my mom took me on a camping trip when I was a young kid, and feeling a connection to the natural world in a way that felt real and grounding and enlivening and connecting. So it was really sort of both sides of the coin. One of my favorite environmental writers is a guy named Mitch Thomashaw, who says that environmentalists are purveyors of wonder and harbingers of doom. And I resonate with both of those. I see and experience and feel very deeply the amount of suffering that we're causing to human beings and others that we're sharing this planet with. And I also am very connected to a sense of awe in engaging with the natural world that opens my heart and fills me with joy. So, the combination of the 1-2 punch of awe and sadness have been sort of my motivators to do environmental work and to be in the field since my early teens.
Now, once you graduated college, you went to South America. Tell me about that. Why did you go to South America?
So I actually went to Central America, and I spent 3 months traveling around southern Mexico, Guatemala, and a little bit in Ecuador. I led a pretty sheltered life as a kid growing up in Los Angeles. I spent, except for a year that I spent in Israel, all of my life had been spent in the United States. And I wanted to explore the world. I had some money saved up, and so I lived with a family in Guatemala for about a month and a half of that. I learned Spanish. And, I grew up very privileged, and there was a part of me that wanted to experience both the exoticness of other countries, but also to meet people from different cultures than the one that I grew up in. And so that was a motivation. I was only there for 3 months. It wasn't a year.
What did you learn from the experience?
Just how profoundly privileged I am, on the one hand, and also the ways in which American consumerist, individualist culture has consequences that aren't so great for people, for communities, and for the environment. So I spent time living in a small village, and saw the ways in which village life led to cohesion of social networks, cohesion in community, a sense of grounding and purpose that was connected to the larger enterprise of the village, and it was inspiring. So, on the one hand, I experienced significant poverty and saw the ways in which those that had less than I had growing up materially suffered, and I also saw the ways in which the materialism of American society that gave me so much, it also had a dark side to it, which I was in touch with when I was here, but that is in the United States, but don't think I felt as deeply, as acutely, and as sort of intentionally as I experienced there. Meaning, I saw it was lost by what we were gaining, in a way that I hadn't really viscerally experienced what was lost, because it was lost, well before I was born.
After South America, I read in your bio that you spent time studying at a Buddhist monastery.
Uh-huh.
Tell me, what did you study there? What brought you there? What was that like?
Yeah. So I spent about 6 months at a place called Green Gulch, which is a Zen Buddhist monastery in Northern California. And, I was there because I was interested in learning meditation. I've always been, without sort of sounding cliche, but, I've always been a spiritual seeker. I remember from second and third grade asking myself questions like, who exactly is this person that's thinking this thought? Who am I? What's my purpose? What's really the difference between me and the person sitting next to me in class at school? And while I enjoyed a lot about Jewish religion and Jewish practice, I was called to a tradition that was much quieter. And I was really interested in what happens when one settles the mind, and what a meditative practice could do for my experience of myself and the world, and how it would open me in the world. And so I went to the monastery to learn how to meditate, and we did that for 5 to 8 hours a day. I don't remember exactly what the schedule was. It was a while ago, and I did. I found a quiet, and I found a way to center myself, and developed some awareness of the ways in which my mind takes me to places in ways that I hadn't been fully conscious of. And meditation has been something that I've done now for 20 years, and I've done several 30-day meditation retreats, and it's a semi-regular part of my life. There are days and weeks when I'm more disciplined than others, but I go back to it. And, from my meditation experience, I discovered a practice called Qigong, which is like meditation and movement at the same time. And that has become a much more regular and formal part of my spiritual practice today. But I would say that the seeds of that were planted at the monastery.
You moved on to the Isabella Freedman Jewish Retreat Center. How did you get there? And tell me about your experience there.
So when I dropped out of law school, I decided that I wanted to spend a year teaching environmental education in a setting where community, spirituality, and meditation was a component of the environmental education that we were doing. And at the time, I heard of a program called the Teva Learning Center, which I believe is still the largest Jewish environmental education program in the country, that was just getting started at this place called the Isabella Freedman Center. And so I left law school, and I went to go work in that program, and was blown away by its impact on the kids who were part of the 4-day program who did Teva. I mean, it was amazing to see. Kids would come to us off the bus with their, blow dryer in one hand and their Game Boy in the other. Game Boy. I don't know if people still doesn't know what that is. And they would leave 4 days later totally inspired, singing about how they're going to change the world as Jewish kids, how they're going to use the tools at their disposal to build a more just, loving, and sustainable world. And it was inspiring, and it was profound. And when I was an educator there, I couldn't imagine that there would be a job that was more fulfilling than I could ever have than doing that work. And so that was my first experience at the Teva Learning Center. I ended up becoming the director of the Teva Learning Center for 3 years, and then decided that I wanted to go back to graduate school, got a business degree, and after I graduated business school, the executive director position at Isabella Freedman, which is the umbrella organization that housed Teva, became available. And while I was at Teva, sort of the ostensible target audience for Teva are 5th and 6th graders who are at Jewish day schools throughout New England. But what I realized when I was there, that the young adults in their 20s and early 30s who were teaching in the program like me, who were part of an intentional, earth-based, non-denominational, heart-centered Jewish community that was living at Isabella Freedman for those 3 months, those folks were transformed and changed and inspired in many ways more than the kids who were only there for 4 days. So I applied for the executive director position at Isabella Freedman, and I had a vision of creating a program called Adamah, which would be a 3-month immersion program for young adults to learn environmental literacy, sustainable agriculture, and the spiritual tools to build sustainable, healthy, connected lives and be inspired to become advocates for social change and environmental stewardship in our world, inside and outside the Jewish community. So I went back to Isabella Freedman because I knew it from my years as the Teva Learning Center director. I had fallen in love with people there and also with the land. It's on 400 acres of forested hillsides in northwest Connecticut in the southern Berkshires. In my interview for the position as the executive director, I shared the programmatic vision of Adamah, and the board said, well, if you can do everything else we want you to do and don't ask us for money to create the program, you're hired. And so they hired me. And I spent 8 years there, founded Adamah, which is now in its 12th years. It's in its 11th year. And so I spent 8 amazing years at the place building an organization that reflected mine and so many other people's sort of deepest values, and I think is today a thriving center for earth-based, trans-denominational, embodied, and hearted Judaism. And I feel very happy about the work that I did there and about what the place is today.
After those 8 years, I read that you took a career break, and now you got to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I read that you lived alone in the woods for 1.5 years.
Yeah, that was incorrect. There were quite a few things that were incorrect about the BAM article. That was one of them. I took a year off, and I spent probably in total about 3.5 months either on silent group retreats or by myself in the woods. The longest stint I had was a 30-day solo in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, just outside of Crestone, Colorado, under the guidance of a guy named John Milton, who runs a school called The Way of Nature. And I spent a few days with him, and then he sent me out to a campsite on property that he owns in the foothills of that mountain range, and I spent a month there by myself. And over the course of that year, did several more week-long solos, both on his land there and on a spot in Baja California. Also did a month-long and then a week-long silent retreat at a Vipassana meditation center called Spirit Rock, which is in Northern California. So no, I wasn't by myself in the woods for a year. That would have been a little much. Although actually, it could have been great. That would be great. I would like to do that at some point in my life.
How did you get to the point where you're at the retreat center, you take the career break, and now you're working at an urban farm? How did that happen?
After about a year of not working and by the time I left Isabella Freedman, I was pretty stressed out. The last year or so on the job there was challenging for me, sort of emotionally and physically. And so I spent, my goal for the year was to have as little responsibility as possible and try to be in my body and learn about myself in ways that I felt like I hadn't learned very much during my time at Freedman because I was so busy working and doing and spent less time noticing and observing who I was and who I wanted to really be in the world. So I took that time off for self-reflection and for healing. And towards the end of that year, thinking about the work that I had done in the world up to that point and thinking about what spoke most deeply to my heart, it was clear to me that the Adamah program in Connecticut that brought together spirit and community and ecology and sustainable agriculture were things that really spoke to me, and that I felt like I had some skills around creating experiences for others that were profound. And so I decided that I wanted to do that again. But I also thought that there were some things that we could do differently than we were doing at Isabella Freedman that could expand our impact to other communities and in deeper ways. And I knew that one of the challenges at Isabella Freedman is that the site is 2.5 hours outside of New York City and an hour from the closest big city. So I figured if we could create an Adamah-like program in an urban area, thousands of people could be touched by our work directly, in addition to the 50 or so young adults that had immersion experiences sort of during the residential program that they were part of. And so that's what brought Adamah. That's what brought the urban to Adamah. Adamah, by the way, means earth in Hebrew. So that's what brought me to the city. And then the other main change is that we decided early on that all of the food that we would grow would be given to local food banks or otherwise distributed to people in the community who don't have access to healthy food. And so, it's one thing to teach people how to grow food sustainably, and it's another thing entirely to teach them how to do that and then to ask them to give it all away. In Berkeley, the farmer fellows who work on the farm, we do one harvest a week for food that we eat for our Shabbat meal, our Sabbath meal on Friday night. But other than that, all the food that we grow, we give away through a free food farm stand that we run in partnership with local social service agencies or through local farm stands. Local food banks.
Adam, tell me about the farm. How'd you go about putting it together? How did you get the land? How did you recruit the team? Tell me that part of it.
So, there was a lot of divine grace involved. There's not a lot of open land in North Oakland and West Berkeley, which is where we were looking for a number of reasons to create the new center, let alone land that would be owned by someone that wouldn't be willing to let us use it for free. We didn't really have any money in the beginning. But through a friend of a friend of a friend, I met a landowner who is the largest owner of commercial property in West Berkeley. And after speaking with him for 20 minutes, we had a handshake where he agreed to let us use the property for 3 years, which has now been extended to the 4th year for free. So I don't know how to counsel someone else to do something like that because I'm not really sure how it happened. For some reason, we had a connection, and he trusted me and agreed to let us use the property. And then, because I had been successful at creating Adamah in Connecticut, there were a number of philanthropists and foundations that, I believed that if I could present to them a compelling case for expanding the vision and expanding the work that we had started in Connecticut, that they would be supportive. And so early on, the TPZ008 Foundation in Providence, Rhode Island, which had been an early supporter and continues to be a supporter of the Adamah program in Connecticut, agreed to give us a $50,000 seed grant to start the project. And it was with that vote of confidence and that cash that we decided to start the organization and actually start investing in the site. Now, the land strategy from the very beginning was always, we knew that we wouldn't be on the site permanently. And so the land strategy was, let's build everything let's build everything portable. The growing boxes are built out of used pallets that can be moved with a forklift and put on a flatbed truck. Our greenhouses can be taken down. Our chicken coop is modular. Our office is a trailer, so it's on wheels. Even our goat pen and milking station is now built in such a way that it can all be taken down pretty easily. And so we've spent quite a bit of money investing in the farm, and part of the vision was to find a lot that was being underutilized in an area of the community where there were people who needed and didn't have easy access to healthy food. But we knew that we couldn't stay there, and we thought that the financial model of finding someone who could donate land because it was just sitting vacant in between development, we thought that was a good strategy. We learned later on that it wasn't so much a great strategy as just sort of dumb luck, because the truth is there are not that many developers that have that much land that are willing to donate it for a reasonable period of time. And so about 3 or 4 months ago, when we realized that our lease was definitely coming to the end at the end of 2014, we started looking for a permanent piece of property. And so now the vision is that if we're in fact able to obtain the property that we have found and are now fundraising for, we will be an organization that both has a permanent home as well as helps establish community gardens and farms on temporarily available lots around the city, but that our organizational life wouldn't be dependent on temporarily available land. It seemed very clearly that it was a poor long-term sustainability strategy for the organization to rely on short-term land. And so right now we've had an offer accepted on a piece of property that's about twice the size of our current property, about a mile away. It's actually along a restored creek, which is sort of amazing in West Berkeley because it's a pretty commercial and industrial area. And if we're able to raise the money, we'll move there at the end of 2014.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. We've got a long way to go on the fundraising part, so can't celebrate quite yet.
Tell me about how you built up your team there at Adamah.
Well, the first person I hired was our farm manager who I had worked with in Connecticut, an amazing woman named Tali Weinberg, and she helped us design and build the farm in its first year. The second person I looked to hire was a guy named Casey Euro, who is the best Jewish environmental educator, as far as I'm concerned, that I've ever worked with in my years of doing this work. And he's now our director of education and community outreach. So because I've been in this field for so long, sort of no pun intended, I know a lot of the people who do really great work. And so I reached out to them. And Berkeley seems to be a place where a lot of younger folks want to be living, so people who are new in this field and could afford to work what we could pay them just happened to come to Berkeley or were motivated to move to Berkeley in part because of the work of Urban Adamah. And then, I started to realize, and what has been the case is that, our fellowship is for kids in their 20s. And when they finish the fellowship, many of them don't know what they want to be doing next. And we have trained them in a way of communicating, in a way of showing up in the world, in a way of using Judaism as a tool to bring more connection into their lives, into their communities. We've put a lot of energy into training them how to be successful agents of change in their own lives and in the world. And it turns out many of them want to work for Urban Adamah. So today, out of the 8 full-time equivalents that we have on staff, 4 of them are alumni of Urban Adamah. So that's been one of the great joys and sort of benefits organizationally of the type of program that we have, is that it ends up training young adults who want to actually work in the organization.
Are you looking for volunteers?
So we have volunteer hours on the farm once a month on Sunday and every Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday morning. So if you happen to be in Berkeley and want to join us on the farm, those would be the times to do it. Occasionally, if someone has a particular skill like carpentry or plumbing that are able to volunteer their time, that's also been incredibly helpful. But other than that, that's sort of the main way that we've been able to use volunteers.
Adam, what's the greatest challenge in running an urban farm?
You know what? I think the greatest challenge of running an urban farm is the same that was the greatest challenge running a rural farm, which I think is the same challenge of running any organization. And I would say that's sort of HR issues. We have a really amazing team at Urban Adamah right now. And I would say that, navigating organizational culture in ways that enable everybody to feel great about their contribution and making sure that the right people are in the right positions, those have been my greatest challenges in general working in the nonprofit sector, and I don't think are particular to running an urban farm. That's sort of the first thing that came to mind. We got really lucky. We got really lucky that we had a great landowner that let us use his farm for free. We got really lucky that the city of Berkeley is really pro-urban gardens and farms. So a lot of the red tape and regulations that would exist in other cities, we didn't have to deal with. There's a church next door to us. It's been a great neighbor that lets us use their electricity, and we let them use our parking lot. And so we have great relationships with our neighbors that have helped the farm thrive. We've been around now for 2.5 years. We've had almost no vandalism. I think people in the community really appreciate us being there. So it feels like it's mostly been a win-win all around.
Adam, what's next for you?
What next is that we're trying to buy this new piece of property, and if we're successful, the farm will become as far as we know, the largest urban community farm in urban Berkeley, Oakland, or San Francisco. For sure, it will be the largest Jewish urban farming campus in the country. And we have a vision of it really becoming both a training center for an approach to Jewish tradition that is as much about the heart and body and relationship to the land as it is about the mind, and where Judaism is expressed as much in the synagogue or the classroom, or I would say where Judaism is expressed as much in the synagogue or the classroom as it is in the streets, in the community, sort of everywhere else where human beings live. That is, the values that underpin our tradition, the values of chesed, kindness, tzedek, justice, ahava, love, are made manifest in all that we do. And my hope is that this center becomes a training ground, a beacon, an example, a living manifestation of how to live from our hearts and in our sort of grounded in our tribal roots, but with our hands and our minds and our hearts open to the world.
Adam, if people would like to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
All the information is on the website. They can just email or call, urbanadamah.org.
Okay, Adam Berman, thank you very much for talking with me today, and thank you for telling your story and the story of Urban Adamah.
Thank you so much for having me and for being interested.
Recorded June 7, 2013. Listen to more great podcasts at thepursuitzone.com.